Hello and welcome to the Pleasurepreneur podcast. This podcast will help you create what you desire in your business with pleasure. Whether that be calling in your ideal clients, making more money, or creating a balanced business-life blend. I'm your host, Regan Fig, pleasure and business coach, published author of A Mother's Pleasure, wife and mama to 3 little wildlings. However you're choosing to listen to this podcast, ask yourself, how can I make this more pleasurable? And do just that. I acknowledge the custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded and produced, the Wadi Wadi people of Derail land. Now, let's proceed with pleasure. Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to this podcast episode. Now, this is a recording from the free offering that I am facilitating at the moment called Launch Like a Pleasurepreneur. And this episode in itself is all about navigating the mid-launch dip, right? So when you are in the launch, feeling funky, feeling bored, unmotivated, deflated, and you kind of want to maybe pretend like the launch never happened and just kind of sweep it under the rug and just like carry on and pretend it never existed. Or maybe it's not that intense. Maybe it's just a kind of lag in energy and inspiration. Ultimately, mid-launch dips happen. Sometimes they're more intense than others, but this episode is going to help you to make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable. And why that's important is because when we make it enjoyable, it's easier to get through. Yeah? When we make it enjoyable, we actually like it. We want to do more of it. And when we're launching, that means we want to sell our offer more. And therefore that improves our result. Because we are selling our offer more, we sell more of our offer. Yeah? So here is 5 ways to make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable and therefore lead to a successful launch. All right, my loves, as promised, I'm going to be sharing with you about the mid-launch dip, right? So if you've ever moved through a launch, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's somewhere in the middle of the launch or somewhere that's not the start, not the end, somewhere in between, right? Where sales may have slowed, where the initial excitement has faded, worn off. Maybe you're not getting the results that you thought you might. Maybe you're not getting the number of signups you thought you would at the rate in which you guessed. And chances are you're feeling a little bit unmotivated, a little bit deflated, depleted, disappointed. It starts to feel hard and it starts to feel like, oh God, like, will I ever get to the end of this? Yeah. Some launches you'll feel worse than others. But what I have come to learn, what I have come to learn is, as a pleasurepreneur, someone who prioritizes pleasure, there is ways that you can navigate this experience, this mid-launch dip, with more pleasure than perhaps you've ever felt before. So yeah, I'm not immune to that not so pleasurable aspects of business either. So I just make them more pleasurable. When we weave in pleasure into the process, this makes us stay focused. It makes us stay motivated. It helps us be fueled by desire, and it makes those multiple 4-figure months and 5-figure months inevitable. Ultimately, it's going to help you achieve your desired results sooner and have you feeling more resourced, which makes so much sense, right? Because we know that if we're doing something and there's no enjoyment or pleasure or desire in it, it is going to feel like we need to recruit and generate our brute force and willpower and just force ourselves through it, right? But we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to deplete our masculine energy at which we have finite resource of. We want to get to the end of our launch feeling inspired and excited and resourced enough to actually then begin our program, our group, our course, whatever it is that we're actually launching. Okay. So in the Pleasurepreneur Mastermind, this is exactly where I share about the Pleasurepreneur process, particularly around launches, about how to navigate those mid-launch dips. And obviously we apply them to make them personalized for you and what you're navigating. Okay, so in the mid-launch dip, you'll feel uncomfortable. You'll want to wrap it up. Your brain will offer you thoughts like, there's no one left to join. Like feel like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, or like, I've talked about it so much. If they were going to join, they would have by now. Maybe your brain is telling you to cut it short, like wrap it up now. Almost that feeling of like, let's just quit now and just pretend like this never happened. Maybe there's a sense of like embarrassment, like, oh, like I'm assuming I'm not going to hit my goal here. I'm not going to create the result I desire. Why don't we just like quietly evacuate ourselves from this situation, slide our launch under the rug and pretend like it never happened. And then obviously we'll work out what went wrong and it'll go better next time. Okay. If you've ever had that experience, you'll be like, yeah, you're nodding away with me. And if you haven't launched before, this is great information to have, because it'll be really helpful for you to know that probably somewhere in your launch, you're going to be experiencing these kind of feelings and having these kind of thoughts. And it's completely normal. So this brings me to the first way that you can make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable. Okay, so I'm going to share 5 ways with you that I make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable. So obviously in this phase, you want to be able to find more pleasure. You want to weave more pleasure in, because the more you can do that, the more you'll activate the brain's reward pathways that we've spoken about before, the more you're going to generate that motivation and be able to keep you going, be able to keep you headed towards reaching your goal. Yeah. So like the more pleasure, the more enjoyable it will be, the greater the likelihood of a successful launch, right? Pleasure equals inevitable success. Why? Because you do not quit, because you keep going, because it resources you and fuels you. Fuels you. It motivates you. It helps you stay focused. There's so many things that pleasure does for you. Just like, let's wrap it up as pleasure equals inevitable success. Remind yourself of that next time you are wanting pleasure, whether that be rest, connecting with friends, exercise, time in nature, fun with your partner, whatever it might be. Remind yourself that pleasure equals inevitable success. All right. So back to the 5 ways that we make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable. Number 1, which is what I already started to talk about. We want to normalize the dip. Yeah. So when your energy and enthusiasm dips during the launch, don't make it wrong. Because we'll go into this. It's kind of like if I think back to when I used to have the experience of perinatal mood disorders. So after my first child, I had postnatal depression and anxiety and insomnia. Now, what was worse than just experiencing those perinatal mood disorders and the way they made me felt was adding on a whole nother layer of suffering, because I was telling myself that because I was having that experience, there was something wrong with me. I was incapable. I was like weak, fill in the blank. Not very nice things. Adding on a whole nother layer of suffering. We don't have to do that here. When there is an experience of a mid-launch dip, just like we know, okay, so this is a mid-launch dip. Let's normalize that. Yeah. A dip in your energy plus a like this isn't working mindset is pretty much what's happening in the mid-launch dip. And of course, that can lead you to a downward spiral. It's going to be pulling you away from your desired result. Yeah, we want to make it more pleasurable, and we can do that by normalizing this phase. And it makes it a little bit more pleasurable because it's taking away the criticism and it's removing that energetic charge. Yeah. So I normalize it by reminding myself some of these things you can play with as well. I normalize it by reminding myself, this is the part where my energy dips and nothing has gone wrong. This is the part where my body feels uncomfortable and wants to quit. This is the part when I get to be creative and double down on self-care. This is the part when people are watching the most and I get to show up in leadership. Yeah. So normalizing this part of the launch brings sweet relief and it makes it so much lighter. All right. Number 2, how we make the mid-launch dip more pleasurable. Number 2, we cultivate creativity. So if you're feeling bored and like you've said everything that needs to be said, like, oh God, I've said it all right now, by now. Like if they're seeing this and they haven't bought by now, they don't want to buy. Like, oh, I've said everything that needs to be said. So if you're feeling that, this is okay. You can reach your result bored. It's like when I tell my children, like, you can still have fun while missing me, or some version of that. You can reach your result bored. But obviously doing it with pleasure is more enjoyable, right? So you do have more to say. You just need to cultivate some creativity. Now, notice I said cultivate, not force. Forcing creativity is like trying to birth a baby that's not ready. Like you're just wasting your energy. Imagine trying to push out a baby because someone said it's the due date, and so you just start pushing. That's kind of what it's like to sit down and force yourself to come up with something creative. It doesn't really work like that. A past mentor of mine, Haley Carr, had used the analogy of like it's like trying to push out a poo that's not ready. So you get the idea, right? We make it more pleasurable by cultivating creativity, not by forcing ourselves to get more creative. So the way you can best do this is by putting yourself in environments that nurture your creativity. Where do you come up with your best ideas? I know for me, it's taking a walk, being in nature, having a long shower, journaling, definitely being in the ocean, out on my board, or even just floating around. You can probably hear my kids. They've just come home from the skate park. All right. So, these activities, they probably sound like self-care. Like to me, if I consider my self-care and I consider those activities that help me generate creativity, they're one and the same. And that's because our creative energy is sparked when our basic needs are met. Yeah. So when I feel like I am totally uninspired and I'm bored, that's not an indication that I don't know what to say, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or like that's the end of my creativity bucket. That's an indicator to me that I need to let myself have more pleasure, let myself have more self-care, whether that be in the form of ritual or, come up with the fill in the blank there for yourself. So cultivate creativity and you'll have more to say and more energy. Interrupting this episode with a freebie for you so that you can create a 5-figure launch whilst prioritizing pleasure without the burnout. Recently, I launched the Pleasurepreneur Mastermind, and 2 out of those 3 weeks of the launch were in school holidays with all 3 kids home with me full time. It was a major oversight, but I went with it. I created 5 figures from that launch, and I wrapped it up feeling excited and inspired and far from depletion. And when my clients started asking questions about how I was able to create that result with so many balls in the air and still feel good and resourced and enjoy the process dripping with children, I gave them my behind the scenes insight. And this is exactly what I have now packaged up and will be sharing with you. Head over to reganfig.com/launch or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back into it. All right, number 3, when it comes to making the mid-launch dip more pleasurable, number 3 is novelty and playfulness. Yeah, so what really sucks during a launch is feeling like subordinate to it, feeling like your launch is in charge of you and your life. And this is not, I'm going to guess anyway, this is not why you have a business, right? Like you get to do this your way. Not only your launch, but your business, the operations of your business. You get to do it your way. You are the boss. You are not the employee. All right. So let's take a minute to fuck off the rules and have some fun and to remind you who is in the driver's seat. Yeah. Sometimes for me, that looks like taking a day off launching and going surfing with my husband, or, skip creating that reel and break my kids out of school for cake or put on some lipstick and go op shopping. Love a good op shop. For those of you in the US, it's like a thrift shopping, right? So ask yourself, like, what can I get away with? What would be fun? How can I do exactly what I want right now? right? Like, let's make it light. Let's make it playful. Launches don't have to be super serious and super grueling. Like, this is what it means to launch like a pleasurepreneur and to be a pleasurepreneur launching. Let's remember to incorporate novelty and playfulness, because that is going to make it more pleasurable, and it's going to bring a fresh energy into not just your launch or your business, but all parts of you, which, obviously is including your launch, right? And the other thing I'll mention here too with pleasure and novelty is that we will seek out the things that are novel. I think I might have shared this in the Telegram group already. Part of our biological wiring is to seek out novelty. Yeah, we are driven to seek out novelty because obviously that means we are seeking out variation, right? And because of human selection, the more variation we can have, the better that is for our gene pool. Yeah, so if you can find a way to make your life and make your business and launch have some elements of novelty, you are just safeguarding yourself from becoming bored and losing momentum. It's naturally going to drive you. Yeah. All right, we've got 2 more to go, so stick with me. They're pretty fun. The 5th one I think will be really, really helpful for you. Okay, so the 4th thing to do in order to make the mid-launch dip pleasurable is to celebrate. Okay, so instead of doing the thing that we're going to typically want to do in a mid-launch dip, which is evaluate our launch before we've even finished it. We might even only be a third of the way in. We do not want to evaluate. What I want you to do is, if you're trying to be like, oh gosh, it's been this long and I haven't, called in any new clients yet, or oh gosh, it's been this long and I've only made this amount of sales, and when I consider the rate at which that's happening, I'm not going to meet my goal, right? By the way, let's fuck off the rate. There is no linear rate in a launch. Decondition yourself from the idea that there is a linear rate in your launch. I mean, maybe there might be once, who knows? Maybe you'll notice that people sign up a lot at the beginning and then maybe right at the end, or maybe it will be a steady stream. But do not expect that every launch there will be a linear progression or success rate when it comes to your launch. Okay, so back to celebrating. We want to celebrate every single thing up until this stage of the launch. Celebrate the externally validating metrics and the internal accomplishments, like how you're showing up and the personal growth you've experienced. If you haven't done this before your launch started, this is also a super great way to identify what you define is a successful launch for you. Right? So chances are, my guess is you're going to define a successful launch by perhaps a financial goal, or perhaps by a certain amount of students or participants or clients enrolled. They're more so the external metrics, right? But sometimes we forget about the internal metrics, right? The internal accomplishments. So here are some ideas as to how you can celebrate something outside of those external metrics, which sometimes in a launch, they're not there. They're not there maybe until the very end. Or maybe they're not really there throughout the launch at all, and it gives you an opportunity to step into seeing them in your next launch. So I want you to celebrate, for example, how many new people are in your world, right? This is just, having new people starting to follow you because of the content you've been sharing, having new people in your DMs, having conversations with them, having new people in your freebie offers. I know there's new people in here in Launch Like a Pleasurepreneur, new people to me, which is so wonderful. That I am celebrating. What else can you celebrate? New relationships made, which is very similar to the last one. You also can share some of those you also might like to celebrate some of the things that are external but not sales, such as likes, comments, shares, views on stories, posts, reels, that kind of thing. And also some internal metrics like consistency, authenticity, creativity, bravery, and getting to know your work deeper. So obviously you'll see that some of those internal metrics, you can obviously plug in whatever is of most valuable to you. Like, what are your top values? And so you get to celebrate how you have been showing up and how you have been, honoring those top values of your own. All right, we're almost there. Number 5. This is the last way that I'm going to share with you how you can make that mid-launch dip more pleasurable. And it's a complete mind shift, right? It's something you can take with you right now and apply to your business and apply to your work and apply to your next launch. Maybe you're in the middle of the launch now. Take this on board now. You can bring this in at any time. Take it on right now and start to ingrain it into your life. And this is the thought that your success is stacking, right? I want you to know that your success is stacking. Yeah. And just like before, when we're talking about evaluating your launch, when you're in the mid-launch dip, now is not the time to evaluate the launch. Your brain's going to want to. Your brain will want to evaluate in this launch, in the mid-launch dip, because it wants to throw reasons at you to quit because it feels uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable. If you're in the mid-launch dip, if it feels uncomfortable and you want to quit, basically. But remember, the dip is normal, okay? Nothing has gone wrong. Don't determine your results based on what's happened so far or how you're feeling right now. You can have the mid-launch dip and a successful launch. And the more you have these launches and experience some form of a dip and see that you can still create results, the more it does feel easier to navigate. But if you haven't done too much launching, I'm going to let you know this ahead of time. Mid-launch dips, they happen to everyone. And they come at varying intensities. And the more that you can embrace them and know that this is part of the launch, the easier it will make it for you. Okay, so your desired result is possible until the moment you finish the launch. Everything you do and have done up until now is contributing to your ultimate success. Nothing is lost or wasted. You've made future clients and you will make more through the rest of this launch. Okay, so I want you to remind yourself of that. If you get to a point in your launch and you are so excited and so motivated and, so in love with your offer, and you get to a point in your launch where it just feels like you want to give up and it doesn't feel good and your brain wants to start telling you you've just wasted all this time and work, I want you to remind yourself that you have been this whole time stacking your success. Yeah, everything that you have done in this launch is contributing to your success. Your success is stacking just from you creating this launch. Okay, so I want you to know, number 1, you're a fucking badass for sharing your work online and running your own show. That's a big deal. You are a big deal. I'm going to wrap that up for our daily drop-in for today. Keep shining, showing up, and bring any of those questions that you have into the thread here.
Mama.
Hi, darling. What perfect timing. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
Talking about launches, I am very close to launching the offering that has you create multiple 4- and 5-figure months as a coach or someone who shares their expertise through coaching or mentoring whilst leading a pleasure-filled life. So multiple 4- and 5-figure months, not in spite of enjoying your life, but because of it. As a pleasurepreneur, we know we don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And this is exactly what you'll learn and focus on in my 5-month group coaching container, the Pleasurepreneur Mastermind. So doors aren't open yet, but I'll be starting to share all the epic bonuses and cash off opportunities behind the scenes this week for those who are already inside on the waitlist. The sooner you get on the waitlist, the more bonuses you have access to, because I want to reward those of you who act on what it is you desire quickly. If you know next year is your year to up-level your business and start consistently bringing in clients and multiple 4- and 5-figure months in your business, this is where you need to be. Join the waitlist via the link in the show notes or head to reganfig.com/mastermind, where you'll find all the details, including Pleasurepreneur results shared from this current round. See you in there.